I'm Dane Rose, and in this video, we're going to muddle towards something around the theme of ego. And to do that, we'll create a circle here. So what is ego? It is an I, right? It's an illusion. It's an I that identifies with a pattern. So an ego is an I identity. Now, an ego without identity, an I without identity isn't an ego. It's an I that holds on, that attaches to a pattern. A pattern of what? A pattern of thinking. These are my thoughts. Why? Because I said so, right? It's an I attached to a pattern of thought, right? Every belief is a pattern. Every thought is a pattern. And the I seeks integrity. It seeks integration. It seeks consistency. And so it tends to self-validate, right? It will look for other parts of reality that affirm its selection of a pattern. You know, they agree with me, they agree with me, they agree with me, and who else wants to agree with me, as a way of strengthening and reinforcing the pattern. So the ego is an I that attaches, that identifies with a pattern, with an identity, a pattern of thinking, a pattern of feeling, because thoughts create feelings. So a pattern of thinking creates a pattern of feeling. A pattern of thinking and feeling creates a pattern of language. Now, when our words diverge from what we think and feel, it doesn't really. It's just we've got a subcode in what we think and feel that says it's safer to hide some of our thoughts and feelings. So when we think and feel this, and then we have a subroutine that says it's safer, i.e. better, to hide some of this, then what we say is the decoy, right? So, but otherwise, without that subroutine of secrecy, and there are some that seek safety through secrecy, right? Basically, if you believe that the world is a scary place, then the best way to be safe from something, the world that is much bigger than you, is to have secrets, right? So those that, ennoble privacy, discretion, secrecy, right? Invisibility, low profile, all of that, locks and all these things. The more you project that the world is a scary place that is millions of times bigger than you are, right? And in a dominance hierarchy, the bigger one wins. If you go to war with the world, you always lose, right? So you can't go to war with an enemy that's much bigger than you. So if you believe the world is a scary place, and you acknowledge that the world is billions of times bigger than you are, then secrecy becomes an important parameter or important paradigm correlated with safety. And then your words will deviate from what you're actually thinking and feeling for the purpose of manipulating, for the purpose of hiding, right? For the purpose of staying safe, right? So that's, but otherwise, the pattern of thoughts creates a pattern of feeling, creates a pattern of speaking, which leads to a pattern of doing, which creates a pattern of being, right? There is a sense of being that emerges out of, in between, in the space of what you think, the feelings that creates, what you say, the way that you say it, which is tinted by what you think and feel, by what you do, and the reality that creates. Right? So emerging out of that is a sense of being. So an identity is an I, an ego, that identifies, that attaches itself to a pattern of thinking, which leads to a pattern of feeling, of doing, of speaking, and of being. And that is the I identity. That is the ego, which as a boundary, as a reference point from everything else, I'm not a table, I'm not that person, I don't think that, I definitely don't think that. I think this, I believe this, right? So the ego is very fragile because it is an illusion, meaning it's functioning as a separate entity within an interdependent ecology. Right? So if you're an ant that only survives in a hive of ants, you only come anywhere near to surviving in a hive of ants that begins with, your mother and your father giving birth to you as an ant. But you're trying to maintain this fragile illusion that you are an independent ant, right? You have nothing, you don't need the parents except to give birth to you. You don't need trees unless to eat the leaves and feed you, right? You don't need oxygen except you do. If you're an ant trying to pretend that you are a distinct ant that has nothing to do with any other ants, it's a very fragile illusion to maintain, right? And so we have the phenomena of weak egos creating conflict and dissonance just to maintain some sense of difference, right? Because how do you not get lost in a relay, in a relationship? I might lose myself in what, right? In the underlying ecology that is the reality. I might lose myself. And what is the self, right? Well, it's not really the self, it's the I that identifies with a pattern, right? My pattern of thought might be changed if I get too close to someone with a different pattern of thought. So that's the ego. And then we have, like over here, we have this, well, perhaps before we go there, we can look at what is the self. The self is the consciousness, the witness, the presence that is beyond the ego, that does not identify with a pattern. The self witnesses the pattern that the ego identifies with. So the ego, that's me. I'm a white person, right? I'm a man. Men are this, right? There's subroutines, right? I'm a man, and men are this, so I'm that, right? That's me, right? Don't threaten me. One of the best ways to understand the cruelty that is directed towards homosexuals around the world is they threaten the subroutine of what is a man, right? Because empathy leads us to connect, but if I'm a man and I connect with you in this way, and that's not what a man is, then I don't know who I am, right? And this is the terror, the greatest terror of the I, the ego, is the terror of no longer existing, which simply means that the pattern that it identifies with, that it attaches to, no longer exists, right? That pattern didn't hold up, right? I said, I always tell the truth, and then this person told me about my lie here, and then this person told me about my lie here, and then this person told me about my... It's threatening my identity, right? My identity is I am the one who never. But. So get away. Stop talking negatively. I'm not your friend anymore. Don't point out my lies because you're threatening my identity. I'm an honest person, right? But if too many of my lies are brought to light, then who am I? Am I dishonest? And then I have dishonest people are bad, and bad people need to be punished, right? And you shouldn't be friends with bad. I'll be all alone, right? And so, no, I didn't lie, right? A new lie. I didn't lie. No, that wasn't a lie, right? And so the self is the part that witnesses the pattern that the I identifies with. So there you have the ego and the self, the one who holds space for, that witnesses. In some sense, the feminine presence to the masculine counterpart of the ego, right? The space out of which and through which patterns flow and emerge, right? So one of the things, this being a channel about my relationship with Lazaris, one of the things that Lazaris has said is that you need to have an ego. You need to have an ego. Right. Another thing Lazaris has said is that you need to have a strong ego, right? If your ego is too weak, you need a strong ego. Now, what is a weak ego in this context? Well, the I that identifies with a pattern. If we're very poor, if we're very marginalized in a capitalist, cult, right? In a capitalist culture, if we're marginalized on the edges, there's just a few of us left, right? The Hasidic Jews, right? The wear their little hats and this and that. And there's only a few of us left, right? Maybe next generation, less people will want to go around with braided hair and hats and buggies and whatever, right? Or black coats in the sun or whatever. There'll be less of us, right? Got to maintain the identity, the pattern, the tradition. The tradition is just the pattern. To maintain, to repeat the pattern. So, a tradition to repeat the pattern, right? A rebellion or whatever to deviate, to diverge from the pattern. You need a strong ego, right? So that when somebody breaks in front of you, you don't just say, oh, well, that means the universe doesn't want me to go to work today and I'll just sit here, right? You drive around the car and you keep perpetuating the pattern, right? If the body doesn't have a strong I, a strong identity, then, a disease comes in and the body says, well, live and let live, take it over, right? So that immune system that says, no, that discounts the things that disrupt the pattern, that protect the pattern, right, is essential to survival, to security, to a sense of love and belonging, which rests upon the foundation of survival and security. So you need a strong ego, meaning that does not disintegrate, that the pattern is not lost by the slightest thing, where you draw, you have a still pond and, you have a perfect reflection of a nice square and then someone splashes it and the wind blows and you can't get the square back, right? It's too fragile. You need a strong enough identity, a strong enough pattern to keep coming back to the shape, right? The virus came in, it was rejected. People burgled the house and you put in new locks, defending the pattern. And so you need a strong ego and you need an ego. Now, why do you need an ego? Why do you need a pattern? Right? Why do you need a pattern of thoughts, a pattern of beliefs, pattern of feelings, pattern of actions? right? Well, certainly to exist as a human being, you need a pattern, right? A dog has a pattern that looks like a dog and barks like a dog and eats like a dog and runs like a dog. That's a pattern, right? A perpetuating pattern in an underlying and very complex ecology in which dogs create other dogs and different kinds of dogs, right? And humans create humans. And so you need, as a human being, as a human doing, as a human thinking, as a human feeling, you need a pattern, right? You need a certain amount of order for the pattern to be coherent. Like if you have a musical composition that's just 100% random, one moment the piano, the next the tuba, the next the synthesizer, all doing their own thing, it becomes incoherent. It loses its sense of beauty, its sense of truth and goodness when it loses all coherence and goes into chaos, right? So we move towards order, right? So a strong ego is an ego that moves towards order with a lot of stamina, right? We need a pattern for an ego to exist, for a consciousness to experience God, Goddess, all that is through the lens of an I. You need an ego, right? To function, to experience God, Goddess, all that is as from the illusion of the outside, right? Because the ego pretends to be separate from the underlying ecology, from all that is. It isn't. But if we're to experience a relationship, a distinction between, if we're all one and feel all one all the time, we don't say that I'm friends with my best friend because they're me, right? But in order to have, friendships and like this person and not like this person and have this relationship with God and this other relationship, this relationship with Goddess, and you need to have the illusion of an I, of a pattern that is separate, that looks at the whole as a separate part. Now, so we need an ego. We need a strong enough ego, right? So we need to strengthen the ego. And then there's the network effect. Now, the network effect can best be explained through the analogy of cell phones. Now, if you have the only cell phone in the world, or let's say you have the only cell phone in the world functioning on this bandwidth, on this frequency, it is a network of one. So you cannot call anyone. So your possibility for communication with that cell phone is zero, right? You can talk to yourself, but you can do that without the cell phone. Now, if two people have a cell phone, right, you've just doubled the possibility field. Meaning, if two people have a cell phone, you can call them up and shout at them and ruin their day, right? So you have the negative possibility field. You can call them up and tell them how wonderful and beautiful they are and raise their possibility field, and they can reply that you're wonderful too, or that you're a piece of shit, right? The possibility expands dramatically, going from one to two people. Right? You could be having a great day and call them up and they're having a bad day, but you lift them up, right? And they could be having a great day and you're having a bad day and they lift you up some. And so you've got all kinds of things. And as a network expands and gathers mass, if you want to lift up a car and move it 10 feet over, let's say the car is driven over your leg. The car has driven over your hand here. Do that. So big tire is sitting here. And because the car is on your hand, you can't stand up to get a jack or do anything, right? You're just laying there. And if you try and scrape on the asphalt, you're going to do so much damage to your hand. You're going to peel all the skin off, top and bottom. Maybe you can't even do it. So what you really need is for a certain number of other people to walk by, to care about you, to have empathy, and lift the car up. So maybe 10 people, come on. Maybe 10 people, I'll get this part of the bumper, you get this bit, you push on the mirror, you do that, I'm going to pull on the top of the door, I'm going to roll the window. Now we're all going to push at once, and 10 people can lift the tire off, and you can remove your hand without scraping all the skin off. Maybe there's some sprain, maybe there's some pain, right? But you can remove it off, and you're free. 10 people. Maybe it's 7 if they're, strong, right? But maybe if it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe he could do one wheel off and one, So, but that's the power of the network, is there are possibilities, there are probabilities, there are realities that cannot happen with a network of 1, but that can happen with a network of 7. There are other possibilities, probabilities, realities that cannot happen with a network of 100, but can happen with a network of 100,000. Right? If you have 100,000 people, well, then we can have a banking system. Then we can have a museum. Then we can have a government. Then we can have this. Then we can have a language. But if there's a network of 1, there's no language, there's no government, there's no, right? And so one of the most important tensions at any given point in life is the tension between uniqueness, deviation, right, authenticity, and belonging to a network. Now, the possibility field expands so much, so exponentially, so synergistically with a network and with a large network that egos conform, default to the network. Why are you speaking English rather than hinky-pank? Right? Just invent a language called hinky-pank, where you go through and you say the in hinky-pank is who, right? And is in hinky-pank is and right, and owl in hinky-pank is right? And you can just go through and, in the next few years, you can have hinky-pank as your whole language. And it's just as valid, right? You can write the dictionary of hinky-pank. You've created a whole new language. It's wonderful. But is it, right? So you've spent several years creating this language that nobody understands, that nobody speaks. Meanwhile, you could have spoken English, not as sophisticated as hinky-pank for sure, but now you can communicate with 1 billion people. 1 billion people speak English. You've got a network of 1 billion people leveraged by learning English rather than hinky-pank, right? So the network effect expands the possibility so many thousand times, right? Why not invent your own currency? Why have a 10-based number system, right? Why stop at 9? Why don't, rather than 10 going to 1, why not, right? At when we come to 9, let's do hein, right? What are we doing? Right. So we'll do hein. Then we'll do, right? Then we'll do sein. And then we'll do tine. And then we'll repeat. Like, it's completely and utterly random that the number system repeats at 9 and goes back to 1, 0, 2, 0. 9 numbers and a 0, right? Why not go to 12 and repeat? Why not go to 20 and repeat? It's very random. So you can do mathematics based on a 12-point number system. And you can get different results than any other person on earth has gotten using that mathematics. You get different results. There are different symmetries. Different patterns emerge. And it could solve problems that cannot be solved in a 9-point number system. It could allow equations to be intelligent, to be coherent, that cannot be coherent in a different number system. So why not try it out? Right? Why not try Hinky-Pank? Why not try a 12-based number system? Why not do completely different values from other people? Right? That you get smiles, right? I'll do this for you if you smile to me. 5 smiles for this chore, 10 smiles for that chore. Well, when you go to exchange that at the local store and you say, here's my 5 smiles, give me a Coke, they say, we don't want your smiles. We want $1. You've lost the mathematical network. You've lost the currency network. You've lost the language network. You've lost the cult network. That's what it is, a cult. A cult is an arbitrary pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is perpetually foisted on the next generation because that is the way that we do things, that we think, we feel. That's what we do. If you want to be one of us, if you want to join our network, our currency, our laws, are this, you have to do this and this and this. But it doesn't make any sense. This is insane. Shut up and do it the way our cult does it, right? So we have the network effect, which expands things, right? 10,000%, right? 100,000%. Being part of a network, copying the cult, expands the probability field, the possibility field by hundreds of thousands of percent versus being a network of one. Now, we also then have the fact that all cults, all cultures are 10x stupid. Meaning that a typical 15-year-old with half a brain can easily show you a 10 times better way to do anything in the cult. Here's how our diet could be 10 times better than our diet, right? You take the American diet, hot dogs, hamburgers, this, that, American cheese. Here's how it could be, white bread, whatever. Here's how you make that diet 10 times better, right? 10 times better. Easy. Switch to organic, switch to local, right? More protein, less carbohydrates, delete 80%, 90% of the sugar, right? Easy to look at data and do a 10 times better diet. It's easy to design a school that would teach 10 times better subjects in a 10 times more efficient way. It's easy to design a justice system that stops punishing people for participating in it. Anyone who has anything to do with the justice system is punished severely for having anything to do with it. It takes $100,000 to have a 1-hour conversation that should have taken place years ago. Right? It takes years and $100,000 just to have a short chat about something completely obvious. So how is it justice? Like if you've been wronged, if you've been harmed, how is it justice to be wronged again? Right? It's absurd. Right? So a 10-year-old can easily redesign their cult to be 10 times better for half the money, half the energy as any cult. Right? In other words, cults are 90% stupid. They're 90% inefficient. They're 90% insane relative to what a 10-year-old could come up with if starting fresh. Right? The trouble is, this is the tension between the 10-year-old and the network. Right? Going from USB-B to USB-C, on the laptop ports, they still, have the old ports, right? The USB-C is smaller, faster, and far more versatile. Duh. Right? But what if there was only one computer in the whole world that had a USB-C port and no peripherals? It would be a useless port that was 10 times better because it has a network of one, right? So and then you have the fact that the majority is always vastly more inefficient, outdated, incorrect, wrong, relative to a distinct minority. Lazaris has said that the majority has never been correct in the history of humanity, which can be seen in the bell curve of adoption of all technologies, including thought. When a new thought is born, one person has the technology, 2 people, 3 people. It's born in a minority, a new innovation, a new thought. The first cell phone is the first cell phone. There's not even another one to call. The minorities hold the latest technology that nobody else even knows about, which is the best technology, but no network. Right? By the time the majority catches on and everyone wants a cell phone, right, it's outdated. The technology is outdated. Then there is a small number of people that have the next thing. Right? By the time everyone has a fax machine, there's email. But just for a small number of military operatives, right? By the time everyone has email, there's another thing, right? In the history of humanity, the best ideas, the best technology is always in the hands of a very, very small minority that's inventing it, that's paving the way, which means that the majority relative to the minority is always wrong. It's always behind. It's always outdated. It's always dumb relative to the bleeding edge minority, right? So you have the teenager. Why do I have to learn this stupid stuff in this stupid school, in this absurd cult to please these idiotic parents? Why? Why, right? And what's the answer? To be part of the network, right? Fine, go ahead and speak hanky-pank, right? Do seashells instead of US dollars. See how it gets you? Yes, it's a better currency. Yes, it's stupid. Yes, yes. So you have mass stupidity, and then you have vast intelligence with no network, right? The network always follows, lags far behind the bleeding edge minority, right? So the ego defaults to the network to gain the possibility field of the network effect, which is so vast that it offsets the stupidity, the insanity that is innate to every cult. Right? So the ego identifies with the cult to be part of the network. And the cult is 10 times worse than any teenager could come up with. Right? If you just listen to outcasts, listen to minorities, listen to teenagers, they will tell you in a few hours everything crazy, everything stupid, everything hypocritical, everything inefficient in the system. Right? But they still need to join that insane, absurd system. And if they don't speak English, if they speak hanky-pank instead of English, nobody even can understand them, all their brilliant ideas, right? So there you have this tension between intelligence and the network, right? Right. Then you have Lazaris asserting that all beliefs are false, so pick the ones that work. A belief is a thought that you believe. The world is round. If you believe it, it's a thought. If you believe it, then it becomes a belief. Right? All beliefs are false. Pick the ones that work. The ego is an ecology of thoughts that it believes. If it doesn't believe them, there's no strong identity. If I say, I don't believe in gravity, I don't believe in this or that, right? There's no strong identity. Lazaris has also said that everything operates within thresholds of belief, right? That walls have a certain threshold of belief, and to walk through walls, you have to put out enough energy to overcome that threshold of belief. And if you can walk through walls, and if not, you have to use doors, right? So there are beliefs, there are thresholds of beliefs. We function within those. And if we didn't have anything that we believe, we would cease to function as an ego. Lazaris has also said that reality, as we think of it, including our ego, is an illusion. Right? So we have the illusion of the ego, already talked about. Lazaris has also said that there's a positive and a negative ego. That the negative ego is always lying. And the positive ego is what? It's not quite as clearly defined, because the ego is an illusion in both ways. But if we bifurcate, the positive and the negative, what are we talking about? Right? What's a positive identification versus a negative identification? Like, if I identify with being happy, is that a positive ego? And if I identify being hateful, is that a negative ego? Right. It's a little bit fuzzy, and I think part of the fuzz comes from the fact that all thoughts, this is an important thing to understand about the illusion, are maps of reality. All thoughts, all ideas are concepts that capture a part of reality. For example, the thought of good and the thought of bad is a paradigm, it's an idea. If you don't have the idea of good and bad, it doesn't exist. Good and bad do not exist without the idea of good and bad. It's one of the things you experience in the transcendent brain. It transcends what? The dogma of identification, the dogma of the separate self, the illusion of separation. So you can think of a Google map of Yosemite, right? And the Google map of Yosemite will, right, it'll show you the road, and it'll show you a big waterfall here, and it'll show a few symbols and show a little hut here. So that might look like a Google map of Yosemite. And you say, that's Yosemite there. But of course, it's not Yosemite. The map does not tell you how many pine cones there are in Yosemite. It doesn't smell of pine cones. You don't hear the sound of it's a map. It's a very, 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 very crude map of Yosemite. It's not Yosemite. It is a symbol for Yosemite. Now, the thought Yosemite is also not Yosemite. It is a crude idea of certain images and memories of Yosemite. And a book written about Yosemite is not Yosemite. It's a more sophisticated map. If it's a 600-page book, each discussing certain parts of Yosemite, you're imagining different things, but you're still not counting how many ants are under that redwood. It doesn't get into that. That's reality. Reality is how many ants are under that redwood. Reality is how many grains of sand is there. Reality is what's the temperature at 3 feet beneath this pine tree. That's all reality. But the thought about reality is a very, 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 very tiny sliver of all that is. Right. There's 20 redwoods. We get a little image, and it's not real. It's a thought. It's a Google map about reality. Language is a map for an underlying reality, and it's a very, very, very dumb map, meaning it's very, very crude relative to the sophistication. There is more activity in a single fingertip in a single minute than the conscious mind can put into words in reality in an entire lifetime. Meaning if I track the subatomic particles within just a few of the atoms within this finger, and I put it into language. First it moved right at 380 degrees, then in 280 thousandth of a millisecond it moved left, and then it moved this, and then this atom bumped into this. If I tried to describe the activity, right, that's faster than the speed of light, within all the subatomic particles of a single finger, I would still be typing to articulate that 100 years later in 1 minute of activity. So reality is what's actually happening. Our dumbed down version doesn't count the subatomic particles, doesn't count their movements or their trajectories or their feelings. It just dumbs it all down and says, there's a finger doing something. We say, oh, wonderful, now I know. No, you don't. Now you have a mental map of almost nothing, describing almost nothing. Meaning our mental maps of reality are less than a trillionth of reality in a single moment. And by the time we expanded our language and our thoughts and our imagination to account for all that's going on, we're left far in the past. Right? We type the 100,000 pages, and then reality has moved on 1 trillion times faster than we can keep up. And so we cope by deleting 99.9% of reality and just pretending it doesn't exist. We just don't notice it, right? That's one good way. And then we dumb reality down to such a crude level where we can say that's a finger without getting into the complexity of the 100 trillion subatomic particles. They're each moving faster than the speed of thought, that actually are the finger, that are in a completely different consciousness than we're in. We just brush that under the carpet, say that's a finger, that's my finger. We brush away the interconnection with all things, how each subatomic particle in our finger is innately connected to every other subatomic particle in the universe. Right? debate or, we don't have to discuss multiverses, right? So we have this phenomena of maps where the ego creates maps that represent less than a percent of a percent of a percent of reality, but likes to pretend that that is the reality, and then gets upset, right, when other people create different maps, noticing different patterns and different things, right? Every single thing the ego thinks is a lie if it believes what it thinks is the reality. The idea that we think we know what's real is a lie. Right? So we have negative ego and positive ego within Lazaris' paradigm, but of course they're interconnected. Right? You have that story, right? And it's a Buddhist story because Buddhism is an older culture than Western culture, right? We're dealing with Chinese culture, we're dealing with Thai culture, we're dealing with cultures that are, 5,000 years old, rather than these are the good people, these are the bad people, let's kill the bad people, right? The good people can kill without tarnishing themselves because those are bad people, right? And we're making the world better by becoming killers of the people that are different. So, right, Western, there's good and there's evil, and you just banish the evil and the evil people. Right? In Buddhist tales, you have the story where the father's sons go out riding and they both break their legs. And everyone says, oh, bad luck, bad luck. The father says, we will see, we will see. The next day, the military comes through and takes all the children of all the other farmers, but not these two kids because they have broken legs. Well, everyone says, oh, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. All our kids are going to be killed and slaughtered on the front lines, right? But your kids can rest home and just have a broken leg. And we will see, we will see, right? Right, and it goes on and on and on and on, right? And the point is that everything that seems bad leads to other things that we think are good, but we try and pretend that these are in totally separate camps, right? I just spent my vacation with a cold, a cough, a cold, sweating, and the upshot of feeling crappy and not wanting to go out and snorkel and all that was that I found myself very interested in doing a lot more work with Byron Katie. And the upshot of that is my life is, let's say, 20% better than it was before. Right? Oh, bad luck, you got a cold. Oh, good luck, you discovered and did all this inner work. Right? That's the way of things, right? We like to pretend that the good is not connected with the bad. An interesting exercise along those lines is, do you think that raping people is good? Or is raping people bad? Right? Usually most people put that in the bad camp, right? Now, do you think you are good? Is it good that you're alive? Well, most people, right? Not all, but most people say, oh yeah, it's good, it's good. What about your parents? Oh, my parents are terrible, right? But it's good that you're here. But would you be here without your parents? Well, interesting thing, if you go back 1,000 generations, right, your grandparents, your great-great-great-great-great, if you go back 1,000 generations, There is not a single person alive. There isn't a single person alive today. There isn't a single saint, Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, that would be alive if it weren't for rape. Right? In other words, if you said rape is bad, and so we're going to stop it, we're going to go back and we're going to delete all rape. And so the children of rape wouldn't exist either, of course, right? This is bad. We're going to banish rape. Well, every single person on the planet today would not exist if you deleted all the rapes that have happened over the last million years. Started with the monkeys. Not all of those are willing partners, you know. So we are good people resting on a foundation of bad people, right? Criminals, bad people, right? You get rid of all the criminals in our history, suddenly there's no people, right? Got to get rid of the criminals, but we want to be here. Yeah, but we're the children, we're the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of criminals. So if you delete criminals from the ecology of time, you don't get the good people because they're all born from criminals. And what about all the criminals? Well, they're all born from good people, right? What? Right? The good people give birth to criminals? That doesn't sound very good. The criminals give birth to good people? That doesn't sound very bad, right? How does that work, right? Well, you know, Lazaris maintains the illusion, right, that there's the negative ego and the positive ego. But it's an ecology. It's an ecology. Right? Some of the good thoughts give rise to the bad thoughts. For example, when you're very attached to your spirituality, you become very controlling. Look at concept synergy and how attached they are. Look at us, right? You can't do this, can't do that, don't do this. That's sacred, right? All this control correlated to what is seen as the important thing, right? It's so important, we got to control it, we got to kill, we got to have revenge, we have to do this, right? All the killing that's taken place in the name of religion. Got to join our religion or we'll kill you. You're not our religion, so we're going to kill you. You killed our people and they're Christians, so we're going to take revenge and ignore Jesus and go kill people, right? So it's an interconnected ecology. So ego is the illusion that allows us to have a unique relationship within God, Goddess, all that is, that identifies with thoughts, with beliefs that are all lies, that are all illusions, that allow us to establish a unique, stable pattern. We also have the fact that in order to learn, we can't be in a state of total chaos. We need to be in a state of order, which is why good coaches, when they want to teach like a tennis player, they'll say, or a golfer, just practice your swing. That's it. Don't worry about the ball. Practice your swing. Get your swing correct. Then we'll aim, right? Get your swing, then we'll aim, right? But you just do one thing at a time, which means you're doing all the other things wrong for a time. Don't focus on those. Just do this one thing. Once you've done that one thing, then do another thing. Because you can't totally change your whole life. I'm going to meditate 10 times better. I'm going to eat 10 times better. I'm going to improve my marriage 10 times better. No, you're not. You're going to disintegrate into crisis, into an overload where your ego cannot digest all the changes that are happening and will just fight it all, go into resistance because the ego's greatest fear is losing control, going into the unknown, right? Entering chaos, dying. Right? So you try and do too much improvement, iteration of a pattern, and the ego resists all of it, right? So you pick one thing, then the ego feels safe. Okay. I'll eat my junk food, I'll watch my porn, I'll complain about my mother, but I'll start jogging in the morning. That's about right. Yeah, you just do jogging in the morning, jog in the morning for a month, and now I'm going to cut down my sugar. I don't want to do that. Well, 20%, right? I'm like, right, I'm going to do that, right? You do that for a bit, right? Oh, I'm not dead yet. My ego's, it's not all terrible, right? And so step by step, right? So we also have this ironic thing that if you change the ego, if you upgrade the patterns of the ego too rapidly, you get nothing. You get complete resistance and indigestion rather than integrity and integration. But if you just do one thing at a time, you leave 99% of yourself not upgraded. And you know it's shitty, but you carry on doing all that shitty stuff just to provide a stable backdrop so the ego doesn't overwhelm. I stop, right? So I'm just going to start walking. Are you sure, ego, that we're going to die if we start walking 20 minutes a day? Oh, it's not enough time. Yeah, but think of all the 20 minutes we've spent watching TV and this and that. Okay, we'll do 20 minutes a day of that, right? And we just do that one thing. Right? Do you think you could try another 20 minutes of this thing? No, I don't want to do it, right? Then we do that one thing, right? Right? And things slowly improve. Right? Thank you for watching.